Hi, and welcome to another episode of Now Dive TV. My name is Ben Boss, and today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about our instruments we use as a diver. Our compasses, our SPGs, our bottom timers, computers, and you know what, all that sort of instruments we look to if we want to know some data about our dives. Today I'd like to explain to you why you should move towards thinking about your instruments as being secondary to you. I mean, all your instruments should only confirm what you already know, or at least guesstimate what you already know. So let's dive in. Let's take it one at a time. Let's talk about our almighty compass. Of course, we need a compass for diving. We need to know what way is home, right? So we use a compass in different ways. We can use a compass if we dive from shore. That way we can just point our compass, the way I do it, away from shore, and I look at the numbers and I say, okay, let's for example see, all right, the heading out is 120 degrees, 180 the other way, means it's 300 degrees back home. I can put my compass, and that way I always have that set. Now, everyone alive, almost everyone alive, can turn themselves around 180 degrees without a compass, right? It's not that hard to go from here to there. That's roughly 180 degrees. Now, when we think about instruments underwater as a scuba diver, we have to find a balance between what is practical and what is precise. And how much precision do we need to be practical? So, give the compass. They're very crude compasses. If you take a compass on a sailboat, for example, it's much more detailed with regards to the degrees that's there, and it's much more trustworthy, I would almost say, but it's much more easy to read down to a smaller number. And that's because in sailing, there is more dependence. You travel a longer distance, so any deviation of your course, the longer you have a small deviation, the bigger, the error is. We're not going to swim that long for us to have that big of an impact. So when we look at a compass, it should only confirm what you already know. So instead of focusing 100% on your compass, try to think more about it as a guideline to get you in the right direction. You know your course out, you know your course home. Happy days. Underwater, you can use that and say, okay, this is 120 degrees. What can I see? There is, ripples in the sand. They're parallel to the shore. There's rocks, there's whatever vegetation. I can see some weird plants sticking out of the bottom there. That's on my course. I'll swim over there. And then I can just look around, keep an eye on that plant. I can zigzag towards that plant if I want. And then when I am at the plant, I can take another course and keep on going. That way, you actually see and enjoy the dive. If you're focusing on your compass, like we see many beginning divers do, focusing on the compass, and every slight deviation they try to correct it, they don't see anything. They don't see their buddy. They don't see the dive, and they, end up usually getting lost. Paradoxical as it might sound, using the compass too much. Keep the compass on a shore dive, heading out, heading in, and that way you always know where the coast is, where home is. And then you only have to figure out where on the coast you are. And that starts at the beginning of the dive before you get into water. Have a look at the dive site. What does the coastline look like? Is it all sand, for example, or do you have like a pier or a jetty or a tree or some weeds in one area, some rocks in one area? Then you can have something to guide for. And then always, if you want to set out at a specific heading to a specific site, do it wrong on purpose. And by that I mean, if you want to go out for, I don't know, there is a wreck that's on a ledge. I remember a dive in Malta where we used to guide people to. It was, I think if I can remember correctly, it's 10 years ago, 110 degrees out from the entry point of the dive site, and then you'd get to this wreck, and the wreck would be just on a little slope. But if you were off just by a little bit when you were heading straight towards 110, then it's very difficult to guess if you're on the left side wrong or on the right side wrong, right? So what I used to do, I would just go, okay, instead of 110, I go 120. Then when I hit the ledge, I know it's on the ledge, I just swim to the left because I know I'm wrong on the right side. So anyway, that's just something to think about. Think about your compass as something that confirms your feeling. And then, of course, when you get completely turned around, you can say to your buddy, hey, is it this way? And the buddy goes, yes, it's that way. And that's always a good idea. Both you and your buddy, even though one of you may take it upon himself or upon herself to guide the dive, both of you should have your compasses set at the beginning and know the courses are heading out. So shore, heading from away from the coast, home, back to the coast. If you do a wreck dive, I'd always, as soon as you come on the wreck from the downline, take a note of your compass, what the direction of the wreck. So the bow is in the, for example, north, and then the stern is in the south, or whatever it may be. That way you'd have an idea of when you lose track of the wreck or something like that. So let's move from the compass towards our computer or bottom timer. What does a computer or a bottom timer show us? Well, a lot of things. Potentially a great deal of things you don't really need. But it shows us depth, it shows us time, average depth, and in case of computers, remaining bottom time or obligated decompression time, if you went over the line of the bottom time remaining. How can we make it that the computer shows us something that we already know or guesstimate? Well, depth is very hard to gauge unless you know the dive site. So if you know the dive site, you know what depths wrecks are at. But time you can guesstimate right what that is compared to your gas consumption. But the decompression information on a dive computer, that's something you know or can easily learn to know. In UTD, we call it ratio deco. It's a very simple way to come up with a strategy for your ascent. And it's all based on the tables and computers and Bielman and whatever that's out there. So don't worry, it's not a new algorithm or something else, something new under the sun. No. It's based on all the knowledge we know. It's just a simple strategy to help you calculate it in your head instead of just trusting on a computer. Now, to give a normal life example, all modern cars nowadays have these computers inside them that show your mileage, your gas mileage, and then it shows you how much gas you have left for the remaining kilometers. So my car, for example, it shows me I can drive, 300 kilometers before I need the tank, before I need the fuel. But I still have that, even though it's also digital or whatever, but it still have that normal gas gauge, full, half full, empty. Plus I have the odometer on my car that can see how many kilometers have I driven, and usually we set that to 0 when we've fueled up the car. So you have a lot of parameters. Plus, your car is fairly consistent. All right, when there's a big load in the car, you're driving it with a trailer or you're driving uphill, there's deviations. But I mean, it's maybe from 9 kilometers per liter or 9 liters per 100 kilometers to 12 liters per 100 kilometers. It's very close. Plus you have a little guesstimate yourself. Okay, when a full tank I can drive around about 900 kilometers. So I have a lot of information to help me decide if the information on the computer screen is correct. I can tell myself, because of my knowledge, that the computer is right. If I drive up a hill with the boat behind us and 10 peoples of dive equipment back in the car, up a long hill, that computer will go down and down and down, and it says to me, hey, you can only drive 200 kilometers before you have to fuel. And I know, no, just relax, dude, because in a minute we'll reach the top of the hill and we'll go down again, and then the number will go bigger. So when it comes to decompression information, if you have some kind of knowledge about what sounds about right, at certain depths and certain times, then you're much more able to know if something's wrong. I'm not saying a lot of computers show you wrong information, although it has happened in the past, and usually it's because of a user error. But that way you can actually have an idea of what's right or what to expect or what to do if something fails. 2 examples. I've dived on a wreck at 30 meters, and in the first dive I used nitrox 32. We dive down, and we complete the dive, and I just followed the directions on my dive computer when I needed to ascend. Dive number 2, we were diving on air. Jump in the water, go down to the wreck. I had forgotten to change my computer settings so that it was on air. It still said nitrox 32. So about 5 minutes into that dive, I look at my dive computer and I notice in the corner it said 32%. And I was like, oh, no. You're calculating my dive now with the wrong information. The dive computer thinks I'm using nitrox 32 as a gas, but in fact I was using nitrox 21, air. At that point I had to abort the dive, because at the point I had no knowledge of ratio deco. I had no idea on what to expect or how long or short the dive should be. Plus, the longer I would stay on that dive, the more I would screw up my computer's data for my next upcoming dives, because it'll track my nitrogen and all that sort of stuff based on what I'm doing. So I had to abort the dive. Completely unnecessary if I didn't use a dive computer and used my brain instead. Another example is we were doing a traveling a trip to a travel destination, and one of my customers bought a dive computer just the same day we left. We met up in the shop in the morning to drive to the airport, and she bought the computer. She was fiddling around with it on the airplane all the trip down. On the first dive, on a check dive to about 15 meters, 10 minutes into the dive, she comes to me and said, hey, we need to go up. I only have 8 minutes left of decompression time. And I could see in her face that she knew that was bollocks. And when we came back to the boat, of course, I got shit for selling her a crappy computer. And I was like, wait, no, the computer only shows you what you told it. So I went into the settings, and she had set it so that we were diving at altitude. She had set it so that it was on a conservative level of +3. So it was completely, overweight, old, injured, drinking, smoking, I don't know what. So it was the most conservative at the highest altitude the computer can keep. Obviously, it would show her less decompression time because it thought it was diving in the Alps or something. So that was a user error on both accounts, where the computer showed us something that wasn't true. And I just think when you invest some time in learning ratio deco, or learning how to calculate or guess or guesstimate or whatever you want to call it, your decompression time, you'll find that it's very accurate, and you find that it's very, very satisfying when you get a hold of it. I mean, at the beginning, to be honest, I was very skeptical, and the more I used it, the more I was stubborn to train myself in using it. I found, okay, wow, there's absolutely no point in using a dive computer. I can do this much more efficiently, and I can adjust my decompression much better to my needs instead of whatever computer tells me. We can talk about this for a long time, and I think I'll do another video on this topic, because we hear a lot of people that dive with dive computers, they put too much emphasis on the computer. And but I will make another video about that, because something to think about before that video comes out is, why does a Trimix computer costs so much more than a nitrox computer, where in effect all they do is measure time, depth, average depth, and then relate that to whatever table, whatever numbers some computer guy put in. So if it's nitrox or Trimix, it's just another set of numbers based on whatever table they're using. So I have no idea why a Trimix computer costs, upwards of $1,000, and a nitrox computer costs $200. I have no idea. But hey, something to think about. But we'll make another video in which I go in a little bit more depth in my own personal experiences when I was, you know, migrating from computers. Because believe me, I've been there all. I mean, I've got computers with 2 screens, color screens, transmitters, the whole shebang. I'm a gadget freak, you know. So I get you all out there that diving with dive computers. But I transgressed from diving computers to just this bottom timer. This has been with me on, you know, 90, 100 meter dives, just this one. And fine, I'm still here, you know. So that's for dive computers concerned. It is also a secondary way for us to calculate. And the backup of a computer is your buddy. A lot of people, especially when they begin to dive with technical diving, they need 2 dive computers. But why? You know, you don't have 2 compasses when you're doing, you know, advanced navigation. I mean, it's just as critical not to come up straight into the shipping lane than it is to be able to tell what depth you are. So why not just then have 2 compasses either? Pressure gauges on a twin set. We'll come to that in a minute. We have 1 pressure gauge on 2 tanks. Why is that? Why not 2? So your buddy is your backup instruments, your backup brain, and your backup gas. So when my computer or bottom timer fails, I go to my buddy and I say, hey, my computer is broken, we have to exit. And we go up. Yeah, but if you had a backup computer, we can just continue. Yeah, we potentially could, but a backup is there to help you get out of a sticky situation, not to continue to dive. It's a philosophy question, I guess, but that's just the way I am. Now, let's come to probably the most interesting topic, the trusted SPG, the way of telling us how much gas we have left. Or is it? Dun, dun, dun. If you can look behind me, you can see this little table I've put up, and all of you certified divers can recognize that. It's probably something you learn in the very first lecture of your diving course. It's the very first question of some diving organizations. Here we can see the depth and the representative pressure at that depth, the volume in a flexible container, and the density of the air at that depth. Now, I've added 2 columns to help you on your way to becoming a thinking diver. I've added gas consumption. I've added bars per minute. Because all these SPGs, they show us bar. And I mean, that's a bit funny because a bar is relative to the volume. So 10 bars in a 10-liter tank is a lot more gas than 10 bars in my little argon bottle. And it's a lot less gas than in a double 12. So bar is a little bit useless information if you don't relate it to the tank size you have, because the bars will move away much slower if you have bigger volume, right? So if you're diving in a double set, your bars will drop slower. Your consumption is the same, but your container is much bigger. So I've made another video on the myths on SPGs, and I'll put a link in the description down below, where I go into why I think it's really, really funny that the 50 bar on every SPG on the market is regarded as the danger zone. Whereas in some cases it's way past dangerous, and in some cases it's more than enough gas to get you out of the water. Because it all relates to the size of your tank. Now, how can we train ourselves so we become the primary source of information and the SPG, the pressure gauge, becomes something that confirms our, guesstimate, our knowledge? Now, when we look at this one, we can see at the surface, at 1 bar, we usually we use around about 20 liters per minute. Yes, it's debatable. Some people with good fitness and experience, they might use less, maybe 15, 16 liters per minute. But hey, let's calculate with 20 liters per minute. You can adjust these numbers to your actual consumption. But 20 liters, it's a good standard. The volume of a flexible container is 1 at the surface, that's the starting point, and the density of that air is equals to 1, like what we have here around us, right? So we come to this one later on. So when we look at the volume at 10 meters, the volume is halved because the pressure has doubled. So if the pressure doubled, it needs twice the amount of gas to get to the same volume. 20 meters, 3 times the amount of gas to get to the same volume, because the volume is reduced to a third, and so on and so forth. Well, I guess you know all this stuff. Now, if we look at our gas consumption, that goes up by 20 liters for every time we descend 10 meters. 20 liters plus 40 is 60, plus 20 is 80, plus 20 is 100. So we keep adding 20 liters per minute, and that just keeps adding the volume per minute. Now, if we then divide that volume per minute with the tank size, then we get something where this makes much more sense, because then we get to bars per minute. Yes, I can see you through the screen realizing, aha, hey, I've never thought of it this way. And if you have, happy days. So if we dive at 10 liter, I hope you can read the small letters. If you dive at 10 liter at the surface, you use 2 bars per minute, because you use 20 liters. 20 liters divided by 10 liters is 2 bars. So after 10 minutes at the surface, breathing from a 10 liter tank, you'd have used 20 bar. It's not that hard, right? So what do you expect your SPG would say after 10 minutes when the starting pressure was 200 bars? 180 bar. And then you look at your SPG and you see 185, and then you realize that I was right in saying that this is on the higher part, so it's a bit high. You can it's a bit conservative, if you like. Now, if we look at a 12 liter tank, it's a bigger volume, the same consumption. It's 1.7 bar per minute. Double the tank, a double 12, is 0.8 bar. I mean, all these calculations were made with a calculator. That's why there's some discrepancies in rounding, because it is rounded up. But if we keep in mind that 1.7, now if we dive to 30 meters, the atmospheric pressure at 30 meters is 4 bar. So the density is 4 times as great. So we need 4 times as much gas. So if we say 4 times the gas in bars per minute to what I use at the surface, it's 4 times 1.7, 6.7. Or thereabouts. I mean, I'll calculate it. So if you get 4 times 1, it's 4. 4 times 7 is 2.8, so it's 6.8. But I've rounded up. It's rounding differences there. So these numbers are much more usable for us divers than say, hey, if I dive at 30 meters for 20 minutes, I've used 20 times 6.7 bar. Alright, 20 times 6.7 bar, that is around about 130, 140 bar. And then you can look, hey, does that compute? Right? Now, if you take the time to make these tables and just sit there and calculate and get a feeling of what's wrong and what's right, and then you can start to, you know, work with these numbers, jumble them around, see if you can create shortcuts for yourself. We all work differently when it comes to maths. So, I mean, working percentages, if that's what makes you happy, related to the 1.7 on the 12 liter, and then just half that if you dive with a double 12. I mean, I usually dive with either 80s, which is 11.1, it's close to 12 liters, or a double 12, which is 24. So I got these numbers in my head, and I usually round them up. I mean, if you look at down to 40 meters at least, if you look at the density or the pressure, because we're using 20 liters a minute average, it's almost the same. So, you know, 2, 1.7, 3, 2.5, 4, 3.4, 5, 4.2. So it's roughly there. It's a little bit less than the surrounding pressure. So I usually, to make it quick, I go surrounding pressure minus 10%. But I'm in ballpark. And then I look at my SPG, happy days. So you can only use your time and your average depth and then you'll relate that to whatever that works out to be in bars per minute. Okay, happy days. So that way your SPG becomes a backup device. I encourage you to make these, take out a piece of paper, write it down, calculate with it, think about it on your next dives and use wet notes, see if you can get there. And it takes some time. Don't expect this to be that you can do these maths and it works out right from the get-go. Practice this. I mean, we need to train trim, we need to train fin kicks, back kicks, we need to train our brain as well. It's the same thing. Don't expect it to work from the get-go. But invest the time, invest the effort into getting this right, and you'll be able to dive with your buddies, and you'll be able to see, and their trim, then there you'll be able to see, okay, they're breathing quite a bit, their gas consumption might be X, we've been diving this depth for this long, they probably have this much gas in their tank. This is what I do sometimes on technical courses, when I've observed these guys very intensely, very focused for the last 20 minutes, and then we come up to the surface. All right, you guys have all around about 110, you might have about 100, let's go down. And they look at their SPGs and they're looking at me, it's like, how the bloody hell do you know all that? How can you know what my gas consumption is? This is very simple math, right? I'm really not a magician when it comes to math, believe me. I can give you a contact number of my mathematicians teachers and they will tell you, Ben, he was not the sharpest knife in the block when it comes to maths. But in scuba diving, it gave me a goal to become better, and I've worked out shortcuts that help me out. A final note in all this maths underwater, because for the skeptics under you, and I was the same in the beginning, don't think you're alone. So the first comment I get a lot when I explain this in courses and stuff is that, yeah, but you can make mistakes. And yes, you can. But then, if you'd make a mistake, and your buddy would make the exact same mistake at the exact same time, that's very unlikely. And then, because you're not having anything written down, you're doing these calculations over and over again, you'd have to make the same mistake at the same point in time, every time, and your buddy would also have the same mistake, and if you dive with 3 people, 3 times the same mistake, I mean, that becomes very unlikely. Whereas, and I know you're going to say, I don't do it that way, but a lot of people do. Going out for a technical dive, someone makes a plan, and that's on the table. Everyone looks at that plan, takes out their slates or wet notes or whatever they're, and they jot those numbers down. Time, run time, stop time, time, run time, stop time, gas switch, time, run time, stop time, time, run time, stop time. The guy who made that table made a mistake. As soon as it's written down, it's like Moses coming down from the mountain with a tablet. Those things are written down, that's the law. The brain shuts off, that's the law. If I adjust without you knowing your watch 1 hour, and you look at the time, you're 100% guaranteed, or 100% sure, it's now 11:30. Where it might just be just, 10:30. Because if you just look at you, and it's 10:30, okay, we go. Then your wife says, hey, no, we need to be there in an hour. No, it's 10, oh, my watch is wrong. Then there's a confirmation. Diving with a team, where all the brains are switched on, you have a backup all the time, even if you don't need it, even if things are not broken. And this is where the magic happens. This is where you start opening up for a whole wide array of more input of the diving. You can enjoy the diving so much more because you're not so focused on the wrong stuff. Anyway. A lot to take in, a long video. I hope you guys didn't fall asleep. Comment with any comments you have, even if you have a way of calculating these things yourself, or if you have something to add, please leave it down in the comment section below. Give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to our YouTube channel, or even better, share this with your buddies if they don't know about our channel yet. So I hope to see you out there, and stay sharp, guys. See ya. Gauge. I mean, it's very... Oh, I'm sorry. That's the coffee machine turning off. Bear with me for a second. Every time you hear that sound, you feel like a cup of coffee. You know what I mean? They should make an alarm or something. They say beep 5 minutes before it turns off. Anyway, I digress.